I left you on the other side where the driver had just braked. Well, we managed to continue on and we never got back to our unit till about 5, 6 o'clock at night. And they said, where the hell have you been? I said, well, we got delayed in snowdrifts and tanks and God knows what else. So, they forgave us. Well, New Year's Eve, 1944, I had a 48-hour pass from Brussels, and going with me was a Scotsman. Funny, his name was English. So we went to back to Brussels. We could have stayed in a hotel, but we went to this bar with him, and we knew we'd be put up there. Well, we ordered a bottle of brandy, and we said we won't open it till midnight. So we had a really good old night carouse in there, and about midnight we opened this brandy and we got really stinking drunk. Well, next morning they put us up in the bar. I woke up with the sound of gunfire and bombs dropping. I thought, well, what's up there? And it was the day the Germans opened an offensive, and they were bombing parts of Brussels. So anyway, nothing happened to where we were, and 24 hours later we went back to our unit. More than happy, having had a good drink. We stayed at Hasselt then, and I got made a waiter in the officers' mess. So they decided to hold a party, a New Year's party, and they invited all the sisters and officers from other units, and we serving a lot of ODV, which is a cheap brandy, and every now and again we're having a swig ourselves, obviously. Then I saw an officer who I'd served with in Malta, and real right character. He said, any of the other lads here? I said, Jimmy, I can't think of his name, he's here. He said, go and fetch him. He was a cook. So I went and fetched him, and there was us in the middle of the officers' mess, with this officer, who was a lieutenant colonel by the way, myself and Jimmy, knocking back drinks, he's raising a glass, the King, God bless him. When you think back, it must have looked a very funny sight. Mind you, everybody else was drunk there, and I finished up, laid out on the floor of the officers' mess, drunk as a lord, that we came and put to bed. But there you are. After that, went back to stretcher bearing, and I got this fella out the ambulance, another stretcher bearer, very big 12-stone guardsman, and I wasn't feeling at all well. I carried him into the reception, and the MO on duty was Rupert M. Hill, who was been in Malta with us, really old GP, very nice fella. Put him down. He said, you don't look too well, son, what's wrong? I said, I don't feel well, sir. He said, sit down. So he stuck a thermometer in me mouth, lay on that stretcher, and that's all I remember for about 2 to 3 days. They took me into hospital, and I was in a raving. I can remember being in a bit of a fever and raving a bit. And when I finally come round, it's quite a relief. Apparently I'd had a pneumonitis of the left lower lobe of the lung, and I was in hospital there for about a fortnight, really, really dodgy. So whilst I was in hospital, notice came through that I'd done 5 years overseas. We'd left 6 months in England, as I was entitled to repatriation under what they called the Python scheme and a home posting. So they got me all ready to go home, gave me the x-ray plates, told me to report sick with them when I got back, and from there I went to the Hook of Holland, I think it was. On the way went to a place called Berg Leopold, which was a big army depot, and saw Uncle Sidlini there, who was stationed there. But then carried on to the port and got into Waterloo, Victoria, I think, mid-afternoon. And I had to go to the depot at Fleet in Hampshire. So I thought, before I go there, I'll go home. So I went home, had a meal, saw my mother and father, left all my kit behind, and went on to Fleet. I got in there about 11:30, 12 o'clock at night. Went into, and they said, go see the orderly room, go see the orderly. And I went into the kitchen, they sent me to the kitchen, and who should be there but Sergeant Dodds, a regular soldier who I'd served with in Malta. I said, hello lad, he said, nice meal for you after all that journey. I couldn't very well tell him, I just had come from home and had a big meal, so I had to get through it somehow or other. Next day was a Sunday, so first thing I went to the orderly room. I said, I've come for my leave pass, travel warrant and ration card. They said, not on a Sunday, there's nobody about. I said, what do you mean not on a Sunday? I said, I've just done 5 bloody years overseas. I don't want to spend another day in this dump. So then I'm going to try and get the orderly officer. So after a lot of persistence and arguing, I managed to get the leave pass eventually and everything going. And to get to the nearest station, you had to get a bus. And in Hampshire, the buses only run up to, I think, 1 o'clock Saturday. So instead of getting a bus, I had to go by taxi to the nearest station to get a train home. Well, I went home and had a meal, and that was quite nice to think, all this was nice rest away from all the war and everything that's connected with it. This was in May 1945. So I had quite a nice time there. Saw quite a lot of Rita. Brought her a ring, all things. Mad, I must have been mad. Anyway, it came probably the time to go back to the depot. When I go back to the depot, I found I'd been posted to the Great Western Hotel, Morton, Hampstead, Devon, right on the edge of Dartmoor, and that's supposed to be a bloody home posting. So I go there, and we're living in Nissen huts in the grounds, but the hotel is a hospital, and the hotel, well, it's a marvellous place. It was built by the W.H. Smith family, news agents, and it turned into a Great Western Hotel, and now it was a hospital. And at the present day, it's a luxury hotel still in use in Morton Hampstead. In fact, I had a bath in a bathroom there that Ribbentrop had used it when he stayed there. The bathroom was the size of, size of a normal kitchen. You could have sprung a cat in it, it was plenty of room, lovely, ornate. We had to have a roll call every morning. So there was another fellow named Gates, G.E. Gates, and I was DC, so I used to say mine was Gates 475. What was there? We had quite a wild time went down to more houses regularly, got to know the locals, had a few drinks and that, met a few church army girls in the canteen there, and the telephone in the Smiths in the hotel, it couldn't have been disconnected because I was able to phone London with no trouble and pay nothing, and everybody was using it, so whoever paid the bill got only note. So I used to phone Rita every day at a shop in Richard's Shops. Then we heard it was VE Day the next day, so I asked for an interview with a company officer, Captain Crosby, known as Bing. I went in for him. I said, I'd like to apply for a leave pass for tomorrow. He said, all leave's been cancelled tomorrow. I said, it's VE Day, sir. He said, I know. He said, that's why it's been cancelled. I said, well, I've got to see a solicitor about a divorce. He said, he won't be operating tomorrow. I said, this one will. I said, it's a friend of mine. It was obvious to this captain I was telling a load of lies. But anyway, he relented, got me leave pass and row warrant and that. And I started next morning to walk to Exeter, where I could get the Cornish Riviera train. When I'm walking on the road and a car's coming along and stops, gives me a lift. Fellow's in civilian clothes, but he's apparently a officer on leave in civics. Anyway, he drops me at Exeter station and I get the Cornish Riviera train. First stop Reading. Well, at Reading, a load of Yanks get on, pilots and they're having a party on the train. They're passing the bourbon whiskey around and either sweet, but not too much. I eventually reached home and went to fetch Rita. Father was on 2 to 10. Mr. and Mrs. Mac, friends of the family, all decided to go over to George Wanstead for a drink on VE night. So Rita, myself, Mrs. Mac, a few of her relatives and friends all went to George Wanstead, and her brother drove a small telephone van. But every time we went and got a drink, we put one in a glass for Grandad, which happened to be, so by the time he came, about 10:30, it was near enough full to the brim, this half-pint glass. I went to buy a round, put down a £1 note, and the barmaid said, that's not enough there, darlings, he said, but as it's who it is, he said, I'll let you off the rest of it. It was, because £1 was a lot of money in those days. Finally, they decided we ought to go home. So, as many of us could crammed into the back of this GPO van, and he said he'd come back for the rest and took us home. But in the middle of Alien Road there was a bonfire, and it was well blazing time we got home, and everybody's dancing and singing. You never see so much happiness. After all, they'd suffered enough to the years. Next morning, Grandad and I thought we'd go out for a drink. So we heard the King and Queen were coming down the high street sometime during the day, so we went in the Cock Hotel. And then we heard the King and Queen were coming, we went out and waved bye-bye as they went past. And it was quite a time that leave. I only had a 48-hour pass. I overstayed it by 2 days. And when I was walking back into the unit, a sergeant there, who was quite friendly with me, said, "You silly fool," he said, "if you come back an hour before," he said, "it'd been all right." He said, "You've only been missing the last hour. He's not going to put you on the charge." So, next morning, I got marched in front of Captain Crosby. He said, "You've let me down." He said, "You're the only new man in the unit who got leave." He said, "You're a fine example to these young soldiers. He said, a man with your experience." He said, "Don't be ashamed." He said, "You let me down badly." He said, "Not much excuse." I just simply said I wasn't in a fit state to travel, so we celebrated. 7 days confined to barracks, 2 days royal warrant. That's 2 days pay stopped. So I got off quite lightly, really. The CB meant nothing to me because I knew all the NCOs quite well, and being a reasonably old soldier, I could get away with a lot. So I used to be down the village every night having a drink, probably with the people who should have been looking after me. It was quite interesting, though, this little village, very close knit. The local laird of the lord of the manor sat on a stool at the corner of the bar and never moved. It was a permanent fixture, I think. And it's only a quiet little village, nothing much going on there at all. I used to try wherever possible, get away now and again, have an unofficial weekend in London to see my parents and of course Rita. Things were getting a bit worrying for me because my mother didn't like Rita, and I don't know, began to get a bit on top of me, one way or another. It was very shortly, after a few weeks down at Morden Hampstead, I went there in, when was it, May time, and then in June, I think it was June or July, I think July 45, I was posted a depot to go overseas. So I thought, well, what again? Anyway, we get to the depot and there's about 60 of us on draft. So the sergeant major tells us all to go to the gym. He wants to speak to us. So we go in the gym. He stands on a table and it says to us the word with the effect that it was a depot, had young recruits there. We was old sweats. He knew we didn't want to go abroad again, but as long as we didn't cause any trouble, they'd leave us entirely alone and we could do as we pleased while we were there, but keep out of the way of the recruits. So anyway, that was fair enough. I think we was there for about 10 days to a fortnight, and I was getting a bit fed up. So I decided to go home for the weekend. Unofficially, we were supposed to be confined to barracks. Anyway, I went home and had a quiet weekend. And on the Sunday, I think it was Sunday night, I was coming back, and Rita told me she might be expecting a baby. What other more news did I want? Anyway, she met me at the station, East Hampstead, saying goodbye to me. And she told me no need to worry, everything was all right. So that was a load off my mind. In fact, that was the last time I saw Rita. More of that later. Anyway, I got back to a little station at Fleet in Hampshire, and it was after 11 o'clock. Well, I was supposed to be in a depot before 11, but on the train coming back were a couple of sergeants that I knew. So as we walked through the gates and was challenged, I marched between them, and they thought that we were 3 sergeants, whereas I was only a private. I get back in the barrack room, and there's a hive of activity. They're all packing. I said, "What's the idea?" They said, "We move out in the morning." So just as well I went back that night. Otherwise I'd have finished up in detention or something. Well, next day we went by, I forget what boat we went from, I think we went from Harwich to the Hook of Holland. and we finished up in Bruges, which was a big transit camp for soldiers. all units used to draw their replacements from these holding units. We were billeted on the banks of a canal in Bruges under canvas. We had no washing water. We had to put a biscuit tin into the canal to get water to wash with. They wanted us to lay kit in a dusty canal bank, which we refused to do. And every morning we had to report into a barrack nearby. A roll call parade, then a march. Well, the march used to start off from the barracks, and every now and again two would drop off there, two would drop off there, in different bars, so they were going round. And the time the march got back to the unit, it was virtually hardly anybody in it. Well, after about a week there, we got our orders, or I think there was about 3 or 4 of us, got our orders to go to Germany. So we went by train to a place called Krefeld in Germany, and we had to stay the night in the barracks of the Hermann Göring Panzer Grenadiers, big barracks. That night we went out for a drink in the town, and we was told to be careful because there was a lot of displaced persons wandering around, robbing and committing mayhem in general. And we had a few drinks, and me and this fellow, we lost our way back to the barracks, eventually finding it. And then we was posted on to a little village called Ludwighausen, which was in the Rhine Valley, and I had to join a field ambulance there. And it was a beautiful little village, all wooden shutters, and just like you imagine in the Alps, if you could imagine it, and untouched by war, not a mark, not a bomb or anything had been falling on it. And our headquarters was in a school, and I was living in an empty house next door, sharing a room with a corporal. I went a permanent picket outside the school, and the CO insisted that when the Germans went past, they either raised their hats or bowed, and if they didn't do it, it means they were pulled back and made to do it, which didn't please them very much. Anyway, whilst there, I got talking one day to this German woman, although we weren't supposed to fraternise at all with the Germans, and you know, talking to us, quite a, I should say she's about 10 years older than me, but she invited me round to have a cup of coffee. Can't turn this down. Oh, by the way, I'd already received a registered letter from Rita, enclosing my bank book I left with her, untouched, she hadn't taken any money out, and a ring saying that she couldn't stand the continued absences and she'd found somebody else. So I was, you know, ready to go. So I got fed up, you know, I was happy in a way, I was sad in another because I thought a lot of her. Anyway, I went round to see her in her apartment, this woman, and she was one of the local postwomen, and she was trying, in a mixture of English and German, she was telling me that to be a postwoman, she had to join the Nazi party, because unless you joined the party, you couldn't work for the state. And she said it'd been terrible living under the Nazis. And on the sideboard was a photo of a soldier in uniform, surrounded by black crepe. It turned out it was her husband. Her name was Magdalena Jorgen. Very nice woman. Anyway, we stayed there a few weeks, and then they decided to move us into Düsseldorf. which was quite a few miles away, more down in the valley. Magdalena didn't want to see me leave, but I didn't have a lot of option. Anyway, we go to, and we formed what was formed called a 101 Medical Company, and we based in a barracks for the German Workers' Front, Deutsche Arbeitsfront, and it was in a sort of a square with a garden in the centre and buildings all around the square garden. Quite a modern building. It was very nice quarters we had there, nice facilities. But how it remained untouched, I don't know, because all around us was devastation. Absolutely, well, you couldn't credit the damage there. And in fact, just along the road from where this Arbeitsfront, there was all the remains of a maternity home was a pile of rubble. So you can understand the German being a bit upset with us at times. Anyway, whilst I was there, I've appointed a medical orderly at the early morning sick parades, which proved quite interesting. One of our MOs was Captain Winder. He was in his 40s, a late call up, and just a GP in civilian life. And he used to give me a lot of leeway in treating the patients. We had one fella, driver wing, dispatch rider, came off his motorbike and split his lip under the nose. So Winder said to me, "I'll sew him up." So Wing said to me, "If you make a good job," he said, "if I end up with a hair nip, so I'll be after you." Anyway, I did the stitching up. I think made quite a good job of it. He came back a couple of weeks later when I took the stitches out and said, "Brilliant job." And his local boy comes from East Ham somewheres. Captain Winder had a very sharp tongue, but he's when you got to know him, he's quite a nice fella. And one morning on sick parade, this fella came in and said, "I think I'm diseased, sir. Let's have a look. If you had it before, if you just 3 times." Window blew his start. He said, "You'll be ashamed of yourself," he said. "The government cures you at great expense, costing £1,000 pumping penicillin into you, and as soon as you're cured, you go out and get yourself dosed up again." He said, "You're absolute disgrace." Anyway, he couldn't refuse to treat him. Then we had our sergeant major. He had a big cyst in his middle of his forehead, and he complained to the MO. So Winder said, "I want you to perform an operation for me." He said, "Under my supervision." He said, "That'd be on your sergeant major. You'd like that, wouldn't you?" I said, "Yes, please, sir." So anyway, the sergeant major came in. He had this big cyst about 3/4 inch diameter, right in the middle of his forehead. So Winder told me to first of all to freeze it with a spray, ethyl chloride spray. Then he gave me this scalpel. He told me to show me where to cut. He said, just top the skin and then pull it back with tweezers, which I did. He said, "Now when you cut the cyst out," he said, "make sure you only cut round it and don't burst it, otherwise it'll grow again." So afterwards I did all this, and I think I did quite good. And afterwards he said, "Well, now sew him up." So I sewed him up and the job was over. I had done first time I've been a surgeon. We also had a woman medical officer. She's an Australian, and she was what we call a horsey type, bobbed hair, rather dumpy and fat, about 40-ish, Captain Prendergast. And she was on sick parade one day, and this fella came in and said, can I see a man doctor, please? She said, what do you want to see a man doctor for? He said, I think I've got a disease. So she said, you took your trousers down to the woman who gave it to you, so you'll take them down for me. So, which he did, of course. She was quite good, really, but I upset her once. Unbeknowingly, it was Christmas Eve and I was on duty, and all the lads kept coming in and bring me a drink, and I finished up blotto, and I laid out on the consulting couch in the surgery. In the early hours of the morning, I brought this fellow in who'd put his hands through a plate glass window. Well, luckily, one of our mates was available and he saw to him. But the Captain Prendergast was a duty officer, so she came over, saw me down on the couch and shook me and tried to rouse me. And all I did, I turned over and told her to F off, not knowingly. Well, next morning, the sergeants always bring early morning tea for the troops on Christmas Day. Sergeant brought me a cup of tea and he said, I understand you're in a bit of trouble, he said, but nothing's been done about it yet. I said, why's that? He said, you swore at Captain Prendergast last night. I said, my God. Anyway, we're all in the MI with all the staff. In fact, Captain Prendergast comes lumbering in, all his bottles in her arm. She comes over to me and gives me a bottle of gin. I said, I must apologise, ma'am. I said, I understood I swore at you last night. Oh, she said, that's all right. She said, put it down to the Christmas spirit. Enjoy this drop of gin. It's been very late because I've got to be put inside for that. Anyway, whilst I'm in the MI room, we used to have regular inspections of civilian employees to make sure they had no infection and that, and my job to tick them off as they came in, take their names down, and they were young girls of 15, 16, right up to grandmothers, and it's very embarrassing. They all had to strip off, and they come past me and I had to tick them off as they come in, and they would check to make sure they were all clear of infection. Anyway, one of them, a redhead, started checking me up and said, hello, could I supply her with some wad, which was cotton wool? Well, you guess what that was for? I said, yeah, I'll get some for you. I said, where can I get it to? She said, she told me in broken English and German that she worked in the church army canteen and she would be there tonight. So that night, which was cotton wool, I went round the church army canteen about 7 or 8 o'clock. She was serving tea, and the waitress service, mind you. And I said, what time do you finish? She said 11 o'clock. So it was a dry, no alcohol. So I was there from about 7, 8 o'clock to 11 o'clock drinking tea. So that made me a bit bloated. Anyway, came to 11 o'clock. I said, I'll see you home. She said, all right. Well, she had a pass because civilians weren't allowed on the streets after 11 o'clock. Anyway, I got her home and took her up to this apartment block, which was very, very modern. They'd been, I don't know, they'd requisitioned it or something, but the door was open from down below. There was a bedroom, 2 bedrooms, a sitting room, kitchen and bathroom, all self-contained in a flat. Really lovely place. One of the few untouched buildings. Anyway, I stayed the night, obviously, it was intended in the first place, and I found out her name was Erica, and she was in her early 30s, and her father was a Polish Jew, and her mother was German. she'd come all the way to Düsseldorf as a refugee because of the Russians advancing. Anyway, we became regular girlfriend and boyfriend after that, and I used to see her quite often. I used to finish work in the afternoon, have a bath, go outside, hail a local government car driven by civilians who would take anywhere for one cigarette, and go. It was just like going to work, going home in the night time. The cost of living out there was terrible. I mean, the civilians couldn't buy a loaf of bread, hardly for love nor money, only for one cigarette. And one cigarette cost 5 marks, which was a sixpence in those days, half a crown for one cigarette. And I'm talking about 1945, remember, or 46 then. And then Erica got me quite a few things on the black market, watches, suit lengths, and I met a black marketeer. He introduced me to a tailor, and I had a silver grey worsted suit made out. They're made to measure, 3 fittings. All it cost, I think, was a tin of coffee and 100 cigarettes, which was nothing. I had a couple of cameras, a necklace from my mother, rings, or you name it, I had it. Anyway, it was a cushy life. There were no parades, more or less do as you please, as long as you were available when they wanted you. And then one of the corporals got demobbed, and I got promoted to corporal, moved from the MI room, and put in charge of the canteen, and also pay NCO. Well, considering they only drew money when they went on leave, I never had more than 2 or 3 unpaid paid every week, so that was a cushy number. The canteen, I had to go to the main Daphne depot at Essen once a week, draw supplies, and used to open the canteen twice a week to sell cigarettes, chocolate, toothpaste, and other odds and ends. And the rebate from that used to allow us to issue free beer, which we used to pick up from barrels from the local brewery, and all I had to do was tap the barrels and let the lads out themselves, because it was only 3 a litre, pint and 3/4 for 3, half a mark. So the rebate from the nappy supplies paid for that. Then this corporal who got demobbed, he bequeathed me a sporting rifle and a twin bore. The top bore was a 2.22 and the bottom was a shotgun bore. And we used to go through a window and shoot at squirrels in the cemetery adjoining our place. But apparently the German civilians complained, and we had a note from the GOC that the practice of using firearms in the German civilian cemetery will cease forthwith. So we did stop. To continue, whilst I was in the medical room, there's a couple of incidents I forgot to mention. One night there was a very heavy wind, a very strong wind, and a lot of the buildings in Düsseldorf were just shells, and it was always dangerous walking through the streets to make sure you weren't around when one of the buildings were blown down, which often happens. We had a call saying that a building had collapsed and some casualties, so we found out they were stationed in one of the few hotels still standing. So we went along there with an ambulance, and in the foyer of this hotel there was 3 or 4 people all covered in brick dust, some of them badly injured, and right by there were some Ensign girls who'd come out to entertain the troops, looking very worried and scared. At any rate, we got a hold of the soldiers amongst the wounded and took them away, and the civilian ambulance came along to take the civilian casualties. But it was, you know, even after the war was finished, there was a danger of being killed, you never knew. Another incident was they brought a fellow in early hours of the morning. He had a torn foreskin and he's breathing like a stuck pig. It hadn't been so tragic, it had been humorous, but anyway, we put plenty of wadding around him and sent him off to hospital. Not much more we could do. Anyway, to continue my saga, we used to have parties around Erica's flat, especially when the other two occupants moved away, and we used to use the welfare gramophone and records, food from the cookhouse, and the army truck to deliver it. It was that free and easy, and many a time I've been coming back in the morning and going into the gateway, as I going up the steps, there'd be the CO looking down, smiling, because he knew what was going on. All the officers had women living with them, and in our unit, a friend of mine, Harry Trude, who ran a small 10-bedded sort of miniature hospital, when he sort of less seriously hurt people, he had his girlfriend living in the centre, being fed by army rations, and some of the service corps drivers, they had their girlfriends living in their back of their army ambulances, all still being fed off the government. And others used to get their girlfriends to come in and make use of the bath and shower facilities we had, which most of the civilians had never had. So, as I say, it was so free and easy, no parades or anything like that. Anyway, we decided that as this sergeant was going on in mob, we would have a party.
We had a party.
So we got this, as usual, welfare gramophone and records, food, and it delivered to the house, and we had a big bowl there. We made a punch of German gin and brandy and several different types of wine, and quite potent, and there were 6 of us at the party, and we all got well sozzled. And I remember this girl crying out in the night to the son, "Please get me a baby before you leave me, go back to England." Whether he did or not, I don't know. After a while, all we had to look forward to was the mob, and unfortunately I'd been told I was going on salute on the Victory Parade in London, but at the last minute it was cancelled because I was deferred for another 3 months to go stay in the army, which didn't please me very much, I assure you. Anyway, eventually I got down for the mob, and myself and another corporal, we started off from Düsseldorf, went to Crefeld, and by easy stages we got to Calais across to Dover, Victoria, and then on to Aldershot, where we went into the Inkerman barracks, ready for the mob the following day. So all we did, we just dumped our kit and went out to have a meal. Me and this other corporal both had several days' growth of beard on us, and as we were walking along, this last corporal of the military police, a young lad about 19, "Hey you two, you need a shave." I said, "When you address me, corporal, give me my rank and stand to attention." So that brought him to his senses. He came to attention and said, "Sorry, Corporal," he said, "I'd just like to draw your attention to the fact you need a shave." Well, I said, "I couldn't care less whether you think I need a shave or not. To my right would be a civilian, so sod off." Which he did. Anyway, early next morning, we go to this big depot and got issued with civilian clothes, suit and all the other paraphernalia, and back home, looking forward to 6 weeks leave. That's really the end of my army career. I went in a naive, callow 18-year-old, came out a world wisely 25-year-old, having had a wealth of experience that the youth of today don't get. Whether it did me any good or not, who knows? My one regret is that 3 of my best friends who also went to school with me were killed in the war, so I must consider myself lucky to still be alive. I try to think about those people, and on Remembrance Day I always have a tear come in my eye when I think of them. And after all that problems of the years gone by, whilst on disembarkation leave, I met my little Ivy, and as you all know, had a very nice and successful life afterwards. In fact, I think Ivy was my really only true love. I think the others were wartime infatuations brought about by the stresses I was in, all with no future in front of them. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this little saga, and all the best to you. Bye.